We're no longer looking at a small sample size with Ronald Acuna Jr., and things haven't gotten much better. On today's Mailbag episode, I'll answer the question: is this the worst version of Ronald Acuna Jr., and is it going to get better? We'll discuss all that on today's episode of Locked On Braves, so let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure you check out the podcast on social media at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for the podcast. Submit your questions to be answered on our Mailbag episode, just like the ones that will be answered on today's Mailbag episode. If you're new and watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button as well to help support the show on YouTube. If you're listening on the audio version, thank you so much for your support as well. Please leave me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, so that others can find us here at Locked On Braves and join our great community of everydayers. I got so many people let me know that they're an everydayer. I really appreciate hearing that from you. If you're an everydayer, make sure to let me know down in the comment section below. It is a mailbag episode. We do one every week here on the podcast, generally the favorite podcast of the week. I think I just said favorited, but you know what I meant. It is the podcast everybody likes to come in on, especially when we do it live like we are tonight. And there's so many people in here: Zach Mania, Leland, Rich Letchman, Jeffrey Humphreys, always in there. Jeffrey, appreciate you. Robert in here, Josh Green, Kevin Capps, Alan Daniel, Braves N01, Matthew Housen, Mark Flowers, Rich Gunderlock as well, says glad we was able to make it live. Thank you so much. Ben Kate, also in here, Anthony, Chris Fields, Floyd, Joseph, Shan, Adam Dowd says an everydayer of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me here live. I know we'll have more trickling in as we go. But it is a mailbag podcast. We weren't going to get into too much to Thursday afternoon's game, a good win by the Braves. We just posted the postcast with me and Grant McCauley on Locked On Sports Atlanta and in your Locked On Braves podcast feed if you want to give that a listen. But just quickly, I'll tell you, I was impressed with A.J. Smith-Shawver and the things that I saw in that outing. Certainly some things to work on, but loved the fastball command that I saw through most of the start, but particularly early on. That changeup still looks really good, just like it did in spring training for him. As according to Baseball Savant, he didn't even throw a slider in this one. It was fastball, changeup, curveball. So that's very interesting. But saw some really good stuff from him. That velocity was still hitting in the upper 90s later in the outing. Offense did just enough. The bullpen was great, and Snicker managed like he wanted to win this one. I'm not saying you always have to try out the best relievers, but he certainly did in this one, and that's a big credit to Max Fried and what he did the night before. So the Braves get the 3-0 win. They get the series victory, and that is all great. So let's move into our mailbag episode here and get to some of these questions. Again, I send out a tweet, post, whatever you want to call it on X these days, and you can reply to that post with your questions. I'll answer them here on the podcast. Joey Milby, another everydayer and great supporter of the podcast, asked a couple of questions. First one's about Acuna, which headlines today's podcast. He said, Acuna looks as bad as I have ever seen him at the plate. Hendricks blew 88 past him today. The only real difference my untrained eye can spot is how unaggressive he has been. He has taken a lot of pitches where last year he was jumping on guys. Do you see anything different? I want to talk about that Kyle Hendricks at bat, because I know you look at it and you say they blew 88 by him, which he did. And that's something that Acuna needs to get to. But I said just before that pitch in my head, so nobody else can tell you this or confirm this, but I said, if Kyle Hendricks throws him a fastball at the top of the zone, he's going to miss it, because everything was down. And for Kyle Hendricks, everything was down. And you know he was looking to get a ground ball there. And I said before that pitch, again, nobody can confirm it because I said it to myself, so I guess I'm confirming it. I said if he throws a high fastball, Acuna's going to miss it. And certainly he did. I don't even think that's where that pitch was supposed to be. I think it was supposed to be down and in, but that was the perfect pitch in that spot. But your concerns are warranted, because it's, and another reason I said that is just because Ronald's been struggling against fastballs in general this year. No matter if it's 88 or 98, he hasn't been able to get to any of them. And, you know, it's a real issue for Ronald. We're no longer looking at a small sample size for him so far this year. I'm getting these numbers from Fangraphs, who are typically a day behind. So these are numbers coming into action on Thursday. 45 games this year, over 200 plate appearances, just 3 home runs. He has scored 37 runs, just 12 RBI, 15 stolen bases. A 13% walk rate is good. That's even better than it was last year. A 24% strikeout rate. And that's the big, I'm going to go through a lot of these numbers with you on Ronald, because I know it is what everybody likes to talk about, because it's your MVP and he hasn't been playing like it. But when you look at this, you look at the numbers so far this year, you have to start to question, is last year the outlier? Because you look at his 24% strikeout rate this season. Last year it was 11.4. It's what we all talked about. Incredible job cutting his strikeout rate by more than 10%, because the 2 years before that, it was exactly 23.6%, and now it's 24. And it was even higher in the years before that, 25.3 in his rookie season, then 26.3, 29.7 after that. So again, you look at the history of Ronald, and 2023 begins to like the outlier. I'm not necessarily ready to say that, but it's hard to look at some of these numbers and not think that. And he has a 320 batting average on balls in play. It's not like he's getting extremely unlucky with batted balls right now. I mean, that is a good bit higher than where it's been most of his career. It's usually more around 330. But still, it's not like he's completely unlucky with the balls that he is putting in play. A 105 WRC plus, that would be by far the lowest of his career. He had a 115 WRC plus coming off the ACL injury 2 years ago. And again, we all kind of attributed that to, basically lack of power coming from having a major surgery. And now we're seeing that again. 105 WRC plus, 100 is average. So he is just slightly above average player, 1 WAR. I mean, he has been an average player to this point of the season. And you really, for me, you look at, some of the other stuff in Ronald's game right now, or really the strikeouts are what stand out, but it's the, just the contact. And I don't think the swing decisions are that bad, which gives me hope. He's not necessarily chasing a ton of pitches. He's just missing a ton of pitches. You look at his contact percentage. Last year, it was 83.1%. This year, it's 74.8%. That's just the number of times he's swinging and making contact. 83.1% last year. It's down to 10%. And again, if you look at history for Ronald, it was 74.6% his first year, then 74.2, 71.3, 75, 77.3. Again, it's another one of these numbers where if you're looking at it historically, 2023 is the outlier. And it has to make you kind of question a little bit. His zone swing percentage is 72.8% last year, 74.5% this year. That's not all that different. Again, for me, the swing decisions aren't the problem. It's just the contact. He's not making enough of it. And that's the real issue. And he's not making enough contact in the zone. Zone contact percentage is 79.2% so far this year. It was 87.8% last year, 83 the year before that, and 82% the year before that. That needs to be in the 80 percentile. So again, I know the question is, and there's another one coming up, when's it time to worry about Ronald? I still maintain that, to me, I don't worry unless I hear that there's an injury that's playing into this. And it almost feels like at this point you kind of hope that it is. Or maybe, and I know there's somebody in the comment section talking about the fact that it's becoming mental at this point for Ronald. And I agree with that. It's been going on for a long time now. Everybody's looking to Ronald. And at some point, I think it does become mental for Ronald Acuna Jr. And I think the other thing too is, like, over the weekend, lost the series to San Diego, but I thought they were good at bats in that series. Signs of seeing the Ronald from 2023. But then this Cubs series was just a complete step back in pretty much all 3 games. And it's just like, we haven't seen Ronald just really get on the stretch yet where it's just consistently good at bats from game to game. And that's worrisome to me. But again, my stance really hasn't changed from, I know we talked about this just about every mailbag, because this question keeps coming up until hopefully Acuna finally does break out of it. I am not worried in the sense that I don't think he's suddenly just a average player. I'm worried in the sense that, is there an injury going on that he's not telling us about, that, maybe is lingering on, that he's trying to play through? Is there something mental going on with him, that he's not really talking about? Because a lot of you saying too, he doesn't look, happy, and he's a guy that plays with confidence. And I see Matt Mock saying it looks like it's confidence. And, Ronald, somebody, he has a ton of confidence. He plays with a ton of confidence. He plays with a lot of joy. And you go back to that 2022 season, and you mentioned it there, he wasn't, there wasn't a lot of confidence. There wasn't a lot of joy. And obviously that comes with results, and he's not getting them right now. And so you're going to see some of that. So I think, again, for me, I don't think the talent is all of a sudden dropping off. Could it be that last year was an outlier of just the best season we're ever going to see from him? Possibly. I mean, it was one of the best seasons we've ever seen from anybody. So that's certainly a possibility. But for him to be backsliding as much as he is right now, that would be concerning. And I'm not ready to go there just yet. Like I said, for me, I would have to think that maybe there's just sort of injury that he's not letting on to right now that's causing some of this. So that was one full segment on one question, although there are some others in here about Ronald. We'll kind of just breeze through those when they come up. But I got a lot more questions to get to on today's mailbag episode. We'll get into the rest of those here next. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event, and you don't when you use Game Time. Trust me, I use Game Time. I've used them to the last several Braves games that I've been to, and it is super easy to use. It is the easiest way to buy tickets, not just for baseball games, but also music, comedy, theater events near you. But Game Time is now the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. And prices go on the Game Time app go down the closer you get to first pitch. Up to 70% you could save when you buy tickets at the last minute for sports, comedy, all that stuff that I'm telling you about. Make sure you download the Game Time app. When you do, use our code Locked On MLB. You'll get, just Locked On, not the MLB part. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code Locked On in the Game Time app to get $20 off. I'm telling you, you want to use this app. You're going to a lot of events in your area. You want to use Game Time. It's super user friendly. And what I love about it, they give you all-in prices up front. You don't get to the checkout screen and all of a sudden the prices just goes way up. You weren't expecting it. They also give you the view from your seat. I never buy a ticket, especially you're going to Wrigley for that Brave series. I hope you check the view from your seat before you bought it. You get stuck behind a pole. So I love the Game Time app. I use it myself. You should use it too. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. And again, use our code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot as well to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Just checking out the FanDuel site right now to see what they got. World Series favorites. The Braves are still second behind the Dodgers at plus 480. The Dodgers up there at plus 280. The Yankees coming in at plus 550. And the Phillies at plus 700. You look at division winners. I'm interested to see. I haven't looked in a while. They still have the Braves. They have the Braves and Phillies tied with the best odds at minus 110. So that is interesting. With the big lead that the Phillies have right now, you go and look at the betting odds, and the Braves and Phillies are currently deadlocked for the best odds to win the NL East. You can check all this out over on FanDuel. Again, mentioned NBA, NHL in full swing in the postseason right now, and they got all the odds that you need for that as well. Make sure you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. Also visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You like listening to sports all day on your TV? I do too, but you know what? I can't listen to ESPN or Fox Sports anymore. I just can't take it. They don't know what they're talking about over there, and they're just screaming a bunch of nonsense. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the nonsense. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, I mentioned I've only covered one question so far. We got about 16 more to get to. Another one from Joey Milby, who says, Schwelly had another monster start at Double-A due to streamrolling the mid-minors. How long do they keep him in Double-A if he keeps going 7+ with 1 or 0 runs given up? I mean, the problem with that is that you got a lot of guys at AAA that need to get starts too, and you need them ready in case you need them at the big league level. So I don't know if there's just a spot for him in AAA at the moment. So I think you will be in Double-A for a little while, at least probably through the summer. And look, if he keeps performing, I mean, you're just a call away at Double-A. But I do think they probably just give him a long run there, see what he can do. But I love Spencer Schwellenbach. He was 4th in my top prospect list for the Braves coming into the season, and he has done nothing to show me he doesn't deserve that spot so far. And Nate says, Hurston Waldrop has been on an absolute tear with Mississippi, virtually unhittable. Do you think AA calls him up this year to give him a shot on the big league roster? Personally, I'd like to see him spend the whole year in the minors to really fine-tune that command. I responded to this directly on Twitter before I realized it was a mailbag question, so I'll read you what I said to Nate. I said, if Alex did it with A.J. Smith-Shawver last year, I don't see why he wouldn't do it with Waldrop this year. But I agree. I'd like to see him and A.J. Smith-Shawver get a long stay in the minors this year to develop. But sometimes need at the big league level outweighs all of that and changes plans. Drew Ford says, thoughts on Zach Eflin from the Rays. 1 year, $18 million left. After this year, could be a Morton replacement. I think Chris Sale was a Morton replacement, to be quite honest with you. But, Eflin is certainly a possibility. I believe he is on the injured list right now at the moment. But you never know what the Rays are going to do. I like Eflin. Certainly since joining the Rays, they figured out some things with him to kind of unlock what he's doing. He's owed $11 million this year, so that's still a pretty big price tag. And one thing we have to consider, and I'm going to do a segment starting in June called Mock Trade Tuesday. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. I know you all like to send in your trade requests for the mailbag, but we'll get all those in on Tuesday starting in June. One thing you have to consider with all these trade possibilities, the Braves are right against that third tax threshold. So you take on a Zach Eflin, unless the Rays are throwing in money, which means you're going to have to throw in a better prospect, it's likely going to take the Braves into that third tax threshold, which maybe they go into it. Again, we don't know, but they certainly stop spending right at that number, which makes me think they don't want to. Another one from Drew. He says, what kind of numbers would Ozuna realistically have to put up to win the MVP? Problem is he's got to put up better numbers than Ohtani, who is also a DH. And, Ohtani is really, really good. I go back to FanDuel really quickly to look at National League MVP odds. Mookie Betts is at the top right now at +170. Ohtani behind him at +350. Ozuna has the 6th best odds right now at +2,000. And there's actually Alec Boehm there at +2,000 as well. So he's tied for the 6th best odds. So he's in the race, but he's got to do essentially what Ohtani's doing right now, and that's playing like the best player on the planet, at least at the plate. And again, that's just going to be tough for him to do. But one thing to consider, if this Braves offense doesn't turn it around and Ozuna's basically carries them all year long, when you're talking about most valuable player, I think Ozuna would win in that regard. I don't think this offense is going to struggle like this all year long, and those guys are going to pick it up. But Ozuna has certainly been the most valuable player for the Braves so far this season. There is no telling where this team would be without his contributions on offense. Another one from Drew Ford says, do you still think the Braves limit innings for Chris Sale with him throwing the way he is currently? Is he the Cy Young combo early on? He's in the Cy Young combo. I mentioned the odds for him the other day on FanDuel, and he's in that top 5. So he's certainly in the conversation. And we've talked about this one as well. I think he's got to get to 170, 175 innings this year to be a legit, contender at the end. He is right now. Do the Braves still limit his innings? I think you just kind of have to at some point. I think you have to look for chances to push him back a day, maybe look for a chance to skip him here or there. He just hasn't thrown a lot over the last several years. And again, I want him healthy for the postseason. And while some of the injuries the past couple of years have been fluky, I mean, he has still gotten some fluky injuries. So who knows if another one is due. I want him healthy at the end of the season more than I want him winning a Cy Young. I want him healthy for the postseason. So I think the Braves are going to play it a little bit safe with him. and probably limit his innings a little bit. I still think he probably gets to 150, 170. I don't think that's too crazy. But it all just depends on how he feels and how his body's responding. But I think as long as he feels good, I think the Braves are going to throw him out there every fifth day. Corey Slovic says, to my untrained eye, it seems like the Braves aren't punishing mistake pitches the same way this season. They're hitting the pitcher's best pitch very hard, but it's leading to inconsistent results. Can that be attributed to approach and game plan? That is something I've questioned this year. Last year, the Braves were so good, especially in the early innings, and they've kind of gotten back to that here recently. Early in the year, they did so good at the end of games. Now they're kind of back to putting on pressure early in games, but they just seem to have such a good approach and game plan from the jump against pitchers last year. Maybe it's just a case where pitchers have adjusted to them after what they saw from the Braves last year, and now it's time for the Braves to readjust. But certainly, there have been a lot of great game plans for hitters going up to the plate for the Braves, again, particularly over this last month or so. So that's something that I've thought about as well. Chris Mofield, everyday pod listener, thank you for that, Chris. Acuna has just been an average player, and we are several weeks into the season, getting on base, but not much power or driving in runs. A lot of Ks. When do we start to worry? Kind of talked about this one in the first segment already. Leland says, who do you think are the best options for the Braves to aggressively pursue as starting pitchers? We need help if we plan to get to the playoffs. I don't believe we have the arms in our system to sustain our chances for postseason play. I don't agree with that. I mean, I get it. You lose a Spencer Strider. You immediately think, how do we replace that? Chris Sale looks like a front of the rotation guy. We know Max Fried is a front of the rotation guy. Ronaldo Lopez has looked fantastic. Charlie Morton, third or fourth starter, it is what it is. I'll say this, and this is something that I've maintained for a while now. I think the Braves will go out and get a starting pitcher at the trade deadline. I think it's going to be at best a mid-rotation. I think it's going to be somebody that's depth to help them get through the rest of the season, and depth in case something happens to a Fried, a Sale, or a Lopez, or a Morton, just so they don't go into the postseason again and have to throw out a Bryce Elder in a game 3 of the postseason. So I do think the Braves look to get a starter. I don't necessarily think it's necessary. If everybody stays healthy, I think this rotation is good enough. And I said that when Strider went down, that I still felt like this rotation was good enough. E. Goldie, our minor league system has a few good pitchers with great two-pitch mixes. When is the decision made to focus on them being relievers, given the top-end talent we have with Waldrop, Murphy, A.J. Smith-Shawver, Schwellenbach, etc.? Laura comes to mind as an example. Had this question last week, who's the more pitcher with the more reliever risk, Waldrop or Lara? And I said Lara, and I agree with that, just because he's younger, and we haven't seen as big a track record as we have with Waldrop at the college level. But it almost feels like the Braves are going in the opposite direction of what you're saying here, Goldie, because they've taken Ronaldo Lopez, who's essentially a two-pitch pitcher, and they've turned him into a starter. They might be looking to do the same with Ray Kerr. It seems like they're looking at pitchers who have two really good pitches and seeing if that can be sustainable for 2 to 3 trips through a lineup. So they almost seem to be going the opposite way of just focusing on pitchers having. Look at A.J. Smith-Shawver. He cut it down to just 3 pitches in this start and kind of wiped the slider in this one. I thought I saw some sliders in there, but at least according to Baseball Savant, he didn't throw any sliders. So the Braves almost go the opposite direction of they're just looking at these pitchers. Do you have 2 pitches that are really, really good and good enough to keep hitters off balance for a couple of trips through the lineup? All right, I got several more questions to get to, and then I want to get into previewing the Pirates series and hopefully some of your comments here. Got some great comments and some not so great comments coming on for those who are here live. We'll get into all of those here and next. Baseball season is in full swing, and make sure that you don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your PrizePicks entries, whether it's strikeouts, RBI, or first inning runs. Take your pick of more or less and add them to your PrizePicks entry today. I'll tell you, and I'm opening up now. You're not going to see it because they don't do it days in advance, but you open up your PrizePicks app. When Chris Sale is on the mound, he has gotten more his last several outings, so that has been a good one for me here as of late. But it really is that simple. I'm doing it right now. You just open up your PrizePicks app. You look at the boards out there for Major League Baseball. They have all other sports out there as well, but I'm obviously the baseball guy. You look at what they have out there. You see a fantasy score for Marcell Ozuna, 8.5. You pick more or less on that. It's really just that simple. You look at strikeout totals for Chris Sale or whoever's pitching for the Braves on Friday. It'll say more or less on that number. That's really all you got to do. It's that simple. It's why PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members, because it's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. Just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. It's really just that simple. So make sure you download the app today. Use our code LOCKEDONMLB, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. All right, let's get through the rest of these questions here, and then hopefully we'll get into some comments and a preview for the weekend for the Braves taking on the Pirates. Next question comes from Nancy. Says, I know how you feel about the balls, but sluggers are still slugging. Check out the Yankees. They are still mashing the ball. Soto, Rogers, Stanton have all been hitting home runs for a while now. Can you concede that? Look, I'll concede this. The Braves are still top 10 in baseball in slugging percentage. I talked about this the other day. They're still up there in terms of slugging percentage. It's just not home runs. You mentioned the Yankees. They also play in the most homer-friendly stadium in baseball, or one of the most homer-friendly stadiums in baseball, and those guys are really, really strong and really, really good at hitting the baseball. The Braves are also up to 14th in home runs now, and they're just a couple of home runs away from being in the top 10, and everybody ahead of them has played at least 3 more games. And the Braves have hit a lot more home runs here recently. So I believe they've now hit 9 home runs in their last 5 games. So you're seeing an uptick, as we typically do when the weather warms up. So I think the Braves are getting there. But early in the season, it's just, again, you're watching the same game I am. You're seeing Matt Olson crush baseballs that just aren't leaving the yard. What really did it for me is a ball that Austin Riley hit. Austin Riley is not somebody that's going to sit there and admire one usually. And he hit one in Atlanta that just died, that you saw him and his reaction when he hit it. He thought it was gone because you saw his reaction after it wasn't gone. Hitters know when they get one. And I've seen Austin Riley. I've seen Matt Olson. I've seen other players. You can see the looks on their face where they thought they got one and they didn't. That is more telling to me than anything. I love Raisel Iglesias says, do you think some of the failed prospects like Waters, Pache, Camargo would have worked out if they stayed with the Braves? Also, I would not mind seeing the Braves trading for Basabe from the Rays. It would give them a young shortstop that can produce soon. I mean, sometimes players just need a change of scenery. It's not like those guys really have taken off at other places either. So I don't think it really would have changed much. I think the Braves have done a pretty good job of recognizing the talent that they have and who's going to be something down the road. Drew says, hey, Jake, Drew from Southwest here, every dayer for the past couple of years. Finally downloaded X today just to submit questions. Thank you so much for that, Drew, who says Elder gets sent down, but like you said, not sure that our other options will do much better. And for AJ Smith-Shawver today, fingers crossed. But have we completely given up on Enoa? I'll say this, Enoa hasn't pitched since April 14th. He re-aggravated that elbow, so he's been out. So he is currently shut down. So unfortunately, Enoa is not an option right now, and unfortunately, he is hurt again. Ian Anderson could potentially be an option as he works his way back at the halfway mark. All right, I think that was all the questions on social media. If I didn't get to yours, I really do apologize, but I think I answered all of those there. I want to quickly get through this Pirates preview. I talked about this briefly on the postcast. This is a series the Braves just got to win, to be quite honest with you. This Pirates team is bottom 5. They're 26th in OPS and slugging, so they are struggling offensively. Braves are going to have Lopez and Sale going in this one. They're two of their best starters this year, obviously what Max Fried is doing. You're missing Paul Skeens. You're missing Jared Jones. This has to be a pretty easy win. There's no such thing in baseball, and especially with the way the Braves have been playing. But you're getting Bailey Falter. You're getting Mitch Keller, who's a good pitcher, but hasn't pitched particularly great this year. You're getting Martin Perez. There's 2 lefties in there. Braves, after starting slow against lefties to begin the year, have been hitting them much better. This got to be a series win, if not a sweep, against this Pirates team. They blew a 6-2 lead in the 8th inning on Thursday to the Giants. The Pirates also have the 4th most strikeouts in all of baseball. So again, talked about PrizePicks earlier. Check Lopez and Sale when those pop up on Saturday and Sunday respectively, and hit the more on their strikeout totals because Pirates strike out a lot. Get to some of the questions here. Mark Flower says, what do you think about Zach Eflin rumors? I think picking up a quality starter makes a ton of sense given that we may be short Morton and Fried next year. That's the other thing I wanted to mention. if the Braves get somebody this season, whoever it may be, I think it will be somebody with at least another year of control to give the Braves some more insurance for next year. That would be the hope as well, but that obviously is going to cost you a little bit more. Just going through a couple of these here as well in the comment section. Thank you so much for joining me here. We got Nate Dogg, Zach Mania made it all the way to the end. Miguel Fria here. Leland Hurt, great podcast tonight, Jake. Thank you for challenging the viewers. That's what we try to do here. We're trying to make you learn. Hopefully you do every time that you turn on Locked On Braves. Thank you so much for that. I've had a great week at the SEC tournament as well. LSU just finished off a great comeback against South Carolina as we started to record this one. I'm going to have a podcast next week as well, an MLB draft preview podcast where I'm going to talk about all the players I saw at the SEC tournament and who the Braves might be targeting. So look for that next week as well. That will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Again, thank you so much for joining. I will do one more question here. I saw one from Josh Green. Thanks for coming in, Josh, and asking a question here. Thoughts on everyone besides Ozuna having career bad years? It's crazy. Again, we've talked about it a lot, but it's not just one player. It's not just two player. They're all doing really bad. I mean, I'm saying this jokingly, but we need to hack the PitchCom system again, because whatever they're doing right now is not working up and down the lineup. I do think they'll turn it around. I'm going to maintain that until it just doesn't happen. But it is crazy that everybody has just been awful has been awful at the same time. And at some point, you wonder when it becomes mental. They all see it happening, and maybe everybody's trying to press too much to get through that. But again, it's just been crazy and wild to witness. I wish I didn't have to, but here we are. All right, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button. If you would, watch it on YouTube, make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast, wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.